What's happening, people, and once again, welcome back to CubCamTV for this, something a little bit different this afternoon, because we have just been to see the brand new MCU epic, The Eternals. I've just got back from the cinema literally a few seconds ago, and I thought the first thing I'm going to do is sit down and have a conversation about it. I'm really trying to kickstart a bit of Marvel action on this channel. I'm a massive Marvel fan, as you can probably see from looking literally to that side or directly behind me. You can see there's a lot of Marvel stuff in my room. Now, I've just been to see the film. It's the first time I've gone to see a Marvel film on my ones. I've got plans this evening, and I wanted to make sure I didn't catch any spoilers, so I went off earlier today and went to see it. And I tell you what, one thing, I've missed being in the cinema on my ones. I love being in the cinema on my own. It's so much fun. You just get to relax, especially when it's empty as well. Great fun. But yeah, I'm looking through a few notes I actually wrote down as soon as the film finished here, and I want to discuss them with the channel. As I said, I'm trying to build a bit of a Marvel back and forth on the channel. The first thing I thought when I left the cinema is the difficulty that Marvel now have as a company in regards to Marvel Studios, the MCU, that as an overall brand. The difficulty they now have is making sure that they can introduce new characters without them having to be attached to older characters. Now, this is the first film that I can remember, unless there was a character in there that I didn't really see, where we didn't see an original either Avengers character or a more recent addition to the Avengers in there to basically allow that transition from a new character becoming recognized. And considering how different Shang-Chi was, you still had Wong in there, you still had other characters that were sort of in the MCU before, you still had Trevor Nelson. Is it Trevor Nelson, his name? I can't remember his name. Trevor Flattery, that's the one, the actor. And he's in there as well, and he almost plays like a secondary role. Even with like WandaVision, you still had supporting characters we haven't seen before. And this is the first time we've actually had a brand new title. I think since Doctor Strange. I think it's the first time since then that we've had a film with entirely a brand new cast that we haven't seen previously, which is a big deal, realistically, when you think about how wide the MCU is. I actually think they did a good job doing it. I mean, this is something that stuff like Doctor Who has suffered with over the years when they introduced Jodie Whittaker and 3 new sort of supporting characters. It was very difficult to kind of bridge that gap, and it took a while for fans to warm, and I don't really think they still have either. But with this, I'd say they introduced 8, 9, post-credit included, potentially 10 long-term MCU characters with no previous backing whatsoever, and including the post-credit scene. I don't think we saw a single face that we've seen in the MCU before. So it was apart from the Eternal, but the Celestial, but even the Celestial was a bit like, we've just briefly from a distance, it was never like that big closer deal. It wasn't a character you kind of fell in love with, you know. But yeah, I think they actually did a very good job on that. That was the first point I wanted to make about this film. Secondly, when they're actually referencing previous characters, which is cool, and it's a cool way of doing it, it did bring up a few thoughts. One thing that Kingo said during the film was that Thor used to follow him around when he was younger, and I think he asks, how is Odin? I've literally just got back from the cinema, so the quotes might be slightly off, but he says like, oh yeah, I remember Odin, I remember Thor as well, he used to follow me around as a child. Now this film has a very strong sort of historical theme running through it. You see them visit a lot of places. You see them visit I think ancient Egypt at one point they're in. You also see them visiting Babylon. That's a big place. Mesopotamia is where you see them right at the start. And then off the back of that as well, you do hear them mention other places. But he mentions Thor following him around as a youngling a long time ago. And then we never actually see them visit Scandinavia. So it makes me kind of go, did the Eternals visit Scandinavia alongside all of the Asgardians? It's quite cool. It's a cool way of tying these sort of epic beings in. Obviously, Athena's name is very similar to Athena. Icarus has a name which is in Greek mythology. These are essentially mythologized characters a lot of the time that we're now seeing make their appearance in Marvel. We know that I think it's Ares is meant to be Zeus is meant to be played by Russell Crowe in the next Thor film. So we are exploring a ton of different iconographies here. We've also heard Bast, who is an Egyptian god. He pops up in in Black Panther. That's where he pops up. I think it's a he. I might be wrong, but yeah, that's a name that you hear pop up in Black Panther. So what Marvel are so good at doing is kind of, I suppose, modernizing these ancient sort of deities to an extent, and these ancient heroes, these ancient people, and bringing them into kind of a new way of thinking about them, which is a very cool thing. But yeah, the general vibe of the film is good. A lot of historical references going on. Obviously, Babylon, I said Mesopotamia. They speak about Athens as well, and the entire point of the film is essentially defending the world from the Deviants, and then you find out the Deviants and the Eternals are basically the same thing, just created to kind of eradicate each other, and essentially to push forward the idea that planets are basically there to birth Eternals, to birth Celestials, which then go on to birth more planets, and then those planets are there to birth more Celestials off the back of that, and it's kind of like a cycle that carries on the entire way round. Now, it's an interesting kind of thing to look at, because it makes you look at the MCU in an entirely different way. Obviously, the Celestials are now almost like the ultimate powerhouse, but it does kind of make you go, why didn't they do anything about Thanos? Why didn't they do anything about these other sort of earth-shattering events? Where do characters like Dormammu come into this, being from different dimensions? Like, it's quite difficult now to kind of arrange a power spectrum of what's going on. Where does someone like Hela, for instance, fit onto this new power spectrum of characters we are amassing? I mean, we can talk about the film a lot. I mean, the actual film plays out quite typically. In my honest opinion, it's a pretty typical superhero film. There's a traitor in the ranks. I mean, it's pretty obvious who that is going to be right from the start, in my honest opinion. Cersei ends up playing the lead role. She becomes the kind of hero. I like the fact that we didn't actually see that much of Ajax. She was obviously the sort of leader, but she never really was center stage. It was primarily about, I suppose, Cersei, Icarus. Athena had a bit of a sort of plot line woven around her as well. But in general, it's primarily around those two that the main plot lines are run. I also liked Hephaestus as well. Now, Hephaestus is the Greek god of forging. The Greek god of forging and, I suppose, technology of the time. So I wonder if there is probably a little reference there. They have quite similar names. But yeah, that's another interesting throwback to a potential pantheon of characters. Following this as well, something that they've started doing really, really well is kind of writing, I suppose, Marvel lore into the lore of the world, if that makes sense. So, for instance, in Endgame, you kind of hear Ben and Jerry's are making the sort of Avengers-themed ice creams. In Far From Home, Spider-Man, you see a lot of outside references. Like documentaries available on the Avengers and things like that when Peter's on the plane flying to Italy. So it's interesting, all of these kind of ways they're almost normalizing the fact these characters exist in this world, which I do really, really like. Obviously, when you look at the sort of A-listing level of actors involved, Angelina Jolie is the biggest on there. I thought she actually did quite well as her character. It wasn't too OTT. Obviously, her character is essentially nullified for the majority of the film, and then she sort of appears towards the end in typical Deus Ex Machina sort of fashion. But it works quite well. And then, obviously, off the back of this as well, we get into the two post-credit scenes. Eros, a.k.a. Was it Star Fox? Yeah, Star Fox appears next to his little goblin elf Donny Pip, and he is apparently the brother of Thanos, but is also an Eternal, but is of Titan. Now, I may have got that wrong, but that's what I heard in the cinema. I may have misheard, but that's what I heard in the cinema, which is very bizarre considering he looks human. Now, I don't know too much about the actual history of Titan as a planet, but being the brother of Thanos, you'd sort of assume they'd look a bit similar. This guy doesn't at all. It's being played by Harry Styles. I mean, if it works, it works. I haven't really got anything to say on that. I haven't really seen him act before, so it could be a stroke of genius. It might not be, but it's another sort of cosmic entity added into the MCU. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. I love the sort of cosmic side of things that we've seen in this so far. The second post-credit scene, obviously we see Kit Harington playing the character of Dane Whitmore from very early on. He's sort of dating Cersei, and he sort of suspects that she's a wizard, like Doctor Strange is quite literally what he says. But then towards the end of the film, he then goes, okay, cool, I've got a pretty weird family history as well. And then she gets beamed up into space. Cersei does, for instance, and then it goes to the post-credit, and Dane Whitmore is the post-credit, and essentially we see the Ebony Blade, which is a pretty legendary thing within Marvel as a whole, and we essentially are now potentially going to see a much more UK-centric arm of the MCU. We visited the UK a couple of times. We visited in Endgame. I think they're in Edinburgh when Vision and Wanda get ambushed by the Black Order. You also see it in Thor: The Dark World 2. I'm not too sure if there are that many other times you actually see the UK in Marvel iconography, of course, in Spider-Man as well, but you're starting to see it more and more as time goes on. Now, I would love a UK arm of the MCU to pop up, especially with Agent Carter kind of Captain Carter now floating around within the What If series. Getting a live action version of her would be really cool, especially if we're now going to see the Black Knight involved as well, which is really cool to see. I'm very excited to see Kit Harington kind of brought into the MCU, especially if it does spur on this sort of UK side. There's a lot of kind of stuff written about sort of King Arthur in the comics and things like that. Excalibur is actually mentioned in this film, and so is King Arthur. So that's a cool way of kind of tying it all together. And just in general, yeah, it's an interesting post-credit scene. Again, no post-credit scene. It's the first time I've seen 2 post-credit scenes that have no reference to anything that has come before either. I think this is the first time we've seen a new film entirely that has no reference to anything outside what is currently going on. So this is what makes it quite fun. I think, is it in Doctor Strange where the post-credit scene, Thor turns up? Is that what happens? And you see Thor in the post-credit scene? I think that might be the post-credit scene for Thor. I know there's a post-credit somewhere where Doctor Strange and Thor are together. But, yeah, we'll leave that there. Just in general, though, I did enjoy the film. I mean, it's a little bit cliche, the actual film itself, which is what's expected with a brand new one. You have to bring people in somehow. I did like a lot of the character development. I mean, the film, what I've seen, has been banned in a few countries due to the gay relationship in the program. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I don't really understand why you would in this day and age. But again, there's a lot of cool stuff. The music is pretty good as well. Maybe a bit over the top to an extent sometimes. You look at a lot of Marvel music and it does kind of boil down to essentially big cinematic orchestral fanfares. I think Shang-Chi did a fantastic job of that. Endgame did a fantastic job of that as well. For this one, I think there was a bit too much epic music playing. That's my personal preference, though. I thought there could have been a bit more suspense going on. But overall, I enjoyed it. I definitely did enjoy it. I went on my own, as I said, so it's the first time I've actually sat there without actually thinking about anything but the film, and I genuinely did enjoy it as a whole. If you haven't seen it already, do go and see it straight away so you can pick out. There's probably loads of stuff I've missed, but I wanted to get this review done straight away. But this is obviously the tagline moving forward. Are we going to see Kit Harington as the Black Knight moving forward very, very soon? I would love to see this. Primarily because it opens up a new arm of the MCU, which would be the UK sort of, I suppose, kind of ancient history, Arthurian division of the MCU. But with Captain Carter floating around in the ether, combined with Kit Harington now being there, and yeah, I think there's definitely a strong kind of scope for it to happen. So hopefully we can see it in the near future. But there we go. If you did enjoy this review and breakdown, please make sure you are hitting that subscribe button on the right-hand side of the page, turning notifications on, leaving a like, leaving a comment, all of that good stuff. And we'll be back with more Marvel news soon, and obviously more reactions as well. Do follow the channel, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll see you all soon. Peace.
Sounding so good right now. My sound in a bright and town.
Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel right now.